Hello, everybody. Appears we are live now, and welcome to the next book stream. And my cat will be jumping around in the middle of this stream, apparently, because he is directly behind me. If you can't see, yeah, it's right there, licking his naughty bits. The and where's well, it's his name's not King George. His name is King Richard the First, as in the Lionheart. It's a pun. And actually, you can see he just walked over there. So we are only have a few viewers coming in right now. Currently with just 37 folks. I know it takes time for people to come in, so I try not to put too much at the beginning of a video. Of a live stream, so that, as people come in. But we will be reviewing the Killers of the Flower Moon, which is scheduled to have a movie adaptation coming out in just 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from now, there will be a movie version of this book coming out. Now, I don't have the physical book because I read it on this, but that also means that I can display stuff on screen while discussing this book. Hence, this allows me to show the actual book. For those who are on YouTube, this is being streamed on both YouTube and Twitch. You can find a link to this book in the description on YouTube. But, in case you do not have, in case you are on Twitch, let me quickly grab the link, and from that link, if it will let me, I will place that into the chat. Hold on a second. It's taking me a little bit longer than it should to just grab a freaking link. There we go. Wanted to get the full citation. So in the chat, this is the actual link to the book. It is also in the description on YouTube, but obviously you don't have a description on Twitch. So this is also the fourth book club live stream. The link to the playlist for that is also in the description if you care to go and see the other times I've done this before. But the oddity for this one, besides the fact that this is, coming out to discuss a book that is being made into a movie soon, is that the that this book, unlike all the other books that I've read, I read specifically to do this stream, and honestly didn't actually like it. Yes, I didn't actually like the book we're talking about today. Now that's not the same as dislike or despising it. I just didn't like it. There were some problems with it that we will discuss later on in the stream. There are a lot of problems with this book that stem mostly from the profession of the person who wrote it. Um, this is written by a journalist by profession. Now, I see people who think that automatically disqualifies him from being called a historian. No, that's not. That the term historian just means somebody who produces history. So yes, this guy is a historian. uh, David Gran is by definition a historian. But his profession is journalism, so he's not a professional historian. He's just a popular historian. Um, and but I will say, especially when talking about this, the problems that arise from David Gran's profession mostly have to do with uh, lacking methodological rigor. That if you don't really care about that kind of stuff, then you'll probably still like the book. That's that's kind of the main takeaway. But as a professional historian myself, rather than just a popular one, I am trained to use all of that methodological rigor. And look for it and hope for it, and am disappointed when I don't find it in a book. It's a bit, it's different for everyone whether or not they want that in a book. Um, but that's why I'm also saying I didn't dislike the book. I just didn't like it. There's a difference. So let's talk first of all about um, what this book is, what it represents, how about the author's previous works, and the historiography on this particular subject. So when the book is about the Osage murders of the early 1920s, what Osage Nation calls the Reign of Terror. It was also the time in which Osage Nation was its most profitable. That they were reaping extreme profits and being murdered because of that. So, rough explanation of what happened there is that I have a banner for that. So there was an oil boom in Osage Nation during the late 19 teens all the way into the 1930s. What that meant is that there were that people who had head rights, as in right to land in Osage Nation, were able to lease to oil refineries, and they basically got a certain not just oil refineries, but oil drilling and all that kind of stuff. But they were able to reap a certain percentage of the profits in order to get to mine on their land, right? To get the oil from their land. So Osage Nation was fabulously rich at this point in time, and people wanted, white people specifically, non-Indians, especially non-Osage, were seeking to gain access to those head rights. And they used all kinds of conniving ways. It wasn't just murder, but obviously murder is like the worst part of it. And there were roughly around 50 murders associated with the what they call the Reign of Terror, as in this time of people trying to use conniving means to um, gain access to those head rights. But they also use things like drugging to ostensibly under like medical um, needs to basically make people invalids and that kind of thing. Um, using um, uh, adoption to adopt adults, um, basically saying that they didn't know how to use their money, and so they needed a protector who would um, deign what money could be used where, and reap a little bit of profit from that. Um, and the there were also a lot of um, basically just not paying for the head rights. That was another pretty common and terrible way of getting that money. So it was incredibly racist in terms of trying to define Osages as being not civilized enough and to be able to control their money, um, and that kind of thing, and set up those kinds of protectorships. Uh, so there was a huge amount of that kind of stuff that constituted the Reign of Terror. Now, just general murder in the oil fields, because this is a mining boom, and when you have boom towns, you get a lot of violence. That's just that's the cost of change, and rather sudden change. Those just boomtown murders don't count as being part of the Reign of Terror. It's specifically people um, using murder and mayhem and conniving means to gain access to those head rights. That's specifically what constituted the Reign of Terror. And remember, this is early 1920s. Sometimes it's related as early as 1919. That like the first of these murders might be murder in 1919. And you can date it possibly as late as the early 1930s, by the time that the boom was drying up. Though there's still actual oil being drilled in Osage Nation even today, but for the most part, the oil field is fully dug. Um, the but afterward, there was kind of this conspiracy of silence. Essentially, Osages didn't want to talk about it because it was traumatic, and um, oil millionaires and later on billionaires didn't want to talk about their complicity in all of this murder and mayhem. So they this became a fairly forgotten topic, to the point that that while sometimes the murders would be brought up, they would only really be brought up in the context of the FBI coming in and solving the problem, rather than the problem itself. There was a movie in 1959 about this, which we'll talk about later on in this stream. But that movie called The FBI Story did popularize the Osage murders, but in a way that was laudatory and congratulatory to the FBI, in which obviously is not a good way of framing all of this, especially considering what we'll talk about later is the FBI actually kind of screwed up pretty royally at first. Although it wasn't called the FBI in the beginning, it was called the BOI, the Bureau of Investigation, rather than the Federal Bureau. That would change during this investigation. But let's more talk about this, the how the book itself is part of a larger historiography, but unfortunately not of books. This is essentially the only book on these murders. The Osage Reign of Terror was essentially a time that has gone uninvestigated by historians. In a way, this was kind of the first and only work on it. There are plenty of articles, but not in historical journals. There's one that was written in like 1959 or 1960 that was in a crime journal, and it basically was trying to talk about what the movie got wrong in 1957. And that was the only scholarly source I could find that prior to this book. Otherwise, you find a lot of popular articles about this, a lot of fiction that talks about it. There's a lot of novels that fictionalize the events. Of course, there's the FBI story movie and all that kind of gave it a new burst of popularity in the late 1950s. But for the most part, there just hasn't been any scholarly interest in this Osage Reign of Terror. You get offhanded mentions of it in historiography about the oil boom itself, but they tend to not focus too much on on investigating the actual murders. Instead, they're the historians who have reported who have written about the various oil booms throughout the Indian Territory and Texas, and the Teapot Dome scandal and stuff like that, all tend to focus on the industry side of things rather than the social side of things. The social history isn't really there. So while you do get offhanded mentions of this and popular mentions of this, the historiography just isn't there. This book is kind of the only thing. And so let's talk about who wrote the book. The person who wrote this book is David Gran. He's actually written some other history books. That these history books, one of them has actually already been made into a movie, and I have already reviewed that movie. It's called The Lost City of Z, or Zed, I guess. More people prefer to say Zed because it was an Englishman who coined the term. So what you have to realize with this is that this is a person who's looking for good stories to tell, right? That's the kind of historian we're talking about. It's a journalist who wants to tell good stories. He's also written a book about the Wager Mutiny, a mutiny that happened in 1730 something. Forgetting the exact date off the top of my head. The Wager Mutiny was a sorry, I seem to be getting a bit of allergies in here. But the Wager Mutiny was a shipwreck in off the coast of Chile. What is Chile today? And on an island that is now called Wager Island. The HMS Wager was the thing that crashed, and then there was like a mutiny on the island about trying to get out and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of people ended up dying of exposure and all that kind of stuff, but quite a few of them did actually make it all the way back to London, and a bunch of lawsuits came from it. It's quite a story in and of itself, and unlike Killers of the Flower Moon, both Lost City of Zed and the book on the Wager, I'm forgetting the name of the book on the Wager Mutiny. I think it's just called Wager Mutiny. That those two are about topics that already has quite a substantial historiography. This book, on the other hand, Killers of the Flower Moon, while being by the same author, using the same journalistic methods that he began with with Lost City of Z and the Wager one, this is different because essentially nobody else has written about it, at least as a historical account. We discussed the other works. So that makes this pretty important. Am I missing chat, or is there or there just hasn't been any in chat? Okay. Sorry for all the sniffling. Apparently I'm just suddenly getting the sniffles. There we go. So let's talk about how how Gran frames the Reign of Terror. So there are 3 sections to this book. Let me get to the table of contents. Here we go. And oh, that's the wrong size. There we go. So there are 3 sections, which he calls Chronicles for some reason. One of like the story of one woman who and her family, how they were her family was targeted, and that's probably what the movie will be, is just this article, this section, and maybe a bit of this section, which follows an FBI agent and explains the investigation into these murders. So that's kind of how it's sectioned up, is that you get you start off with the story of the actual murders and who was affected by them, and then you get to this section, which is about the FBI investigation and how that ended up actually affecting the FBI. And then there's the third section called The Reporter, and get there, which is essentially the book talking about how the author talking about himself, and like how this story has affected Osage Nation, and talking to them and telling their story. We'll get to why this last section, especially the basically a author self-insert, is not particularly good, and not well thought out. You know what? I'm going to take Punk's advice. I need to go blow my nose. It's for some reason I'm getting very sniffly. So I'm going to take a brief break and go blow my nose because I really need to. I will be back in just a little bit. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I for some reason I didn't have allergies before starting this stream, and then suddenly I had it. uh, so the we're talking about the author's self-insert here. But this is mostly about the aftermath, so you won't actually see this last section in the movie. So this structure has a particular way of telling the story of the Reign of Terror in the Osage Reign of. Makes it sound like the Osage that the Osage Nation itself was doing the terrorizing rather than being terrorized. But Reign of Terror in Osage Nation. Hey, that I just realized that little banner thing doesn't have nation capitalized. I need to edit that real quick. Hold on a second. Should have that capitalized. There we go. I see what you said there, Prairie. Anyways, so by sectioning off the story into the victim story and investigation and then like aftermath, this necessarily doesn't leave a lot of room for analysis. So essentially we get the story of only about 12 of these murders, even though there's at least like 50. But what's interesting about the book is that he's trying to connect a lot of separate stories into this larger story of the Reign of Terror. So what happens is that um, that we get basically one bad guy. Um, this guy named Hale, who that is not my notes. Yeah, give me my notes. Um, so let's see here. So one thing you always want to look when you're starting to read a book, right, is to find the thesis. Well, the problem is the thesis comes right at the end of the book. Um, the beginning doesn't actually show um, a uh, thesis. So you always want to find that. What just happened? Show me my highlight. Thank you. That's what I wanted. So the main thing that the author is trying to argue is that the murders of the Osage for their head rights were not the result of a single conspiracy orchestrated by Hale, this kind of patriarch who weaseled his family into Osage families and then like killed their wives in order to gain access to their head rights. But there's also kind of the problem that that isn't really what he argues throughout the book. You only get one story in this. Um, uh, so apparently, yelling Wilson can clear out up a runny nose. Wilson. Yeah, no, I don't think that'll work. But taking a pill will, which is what I did. So hopefully that will kick in soon. But the anyways the we only really get that one story. So let's talk about what that one story was. So I will go back to this. The well, actually, it says it right above that thing I was showing highlighted. Hold on a second. It says it perfectly. Uh, according to most historical accounts, the Osage Reign of Terror spanned from the spring of 1921, when Hale and Anna Brown were murdered. When Hale had Anna Brown murdered, to January 1926, when Hale was arrested. So Lewis's murder meant that the killings over head rights had begun at least 3 years earlier than was widely assumed. And if red corns, so these are other murders that he mentions later on. The Lewis's murder being the 1919 one, Redcorn being a a leader in Osage, and his grandfather might have been poisoned in 1931. Then the killings also continued long after Hale's arrest. So the standard narrative is that the FBI swept in and saved the day, and that's kind of how this book tells it, unfortunately, until you get to that reporter part. Let's go back to the table of contents. Oh, and this is the woman who got murdered. That's kind of like the starting point for this. But we start off with a woman kind of vanishing. Then her body being found in a makeshift investigation being performed. He has this whole ramble at the beginning about in fact, I think I have it highlighted in red. But he goes on this whole ramble about like how the frontier lawmen were primarily gunfighters and trackers. They were expected to deter crimes and apprehend a known gunman alive, possible, dead if necessary. It's this is totally wrong. This is like blatantly he has not read anything about how frontier justice worked. And like goes on this whole ramble about how like a coroner's jury is like this obsolete thing that nobody ever does, and it's people taking the law into their own hands. It's like coroner's juries are still required in many states if murder is assessed. It's just now we have police, but prior to police we had other forms of law enforcement, and in a lot of places we still do. This is not some distant past odd thing, and it's also very poorly explained here. So if you have read the book, this is one part that it's just dreadfully incorrect, because the author clearly hadn't like looked up how any prior forms of law enforcement worked. Obviously you need law enforcement if you're going to have laws. That's how laws work, but you don't necessarily have to have police. Police didn't exist in the United States until the 1830s, if you didn't know that. I actually have a whole episode about police brutality that has a beginning section talking about like the history of policing in the United States. Osage Nation did not have police at this point. They had sheriffs, of course, but they also had a tribal council that was... What the heck? King, stop. King. My cat is hold on a second. King, stop it. King. Oh, you got stuck. I know, hold on. There you go. He got stuck on a coat. He got stuck on a coat, little dimwit. Come here. Hi. Hi there. Ah, stupid little guy. Cats can be incredibly stupid sometimes. And watch, he's about to get stuck again. Watch. You'll start seeing my hat rack right there. The hat tree start moving around because he's gonna do something stupid. But sorry about that. Had to go save my cat from himself. Anyways, so to correct what this book gets dreadfully wrong, a coroner's jury is every county has a county coroner, right? When a dead body shows up, it's up to him to determine if that now what? Stupid cat. It's off meowing in my bedroom. But anyways, the coroner will often assemble a coroner's jury, which is essentially just random citizens to determine whether or not it was a murder. If it's pretty obvious that it's not a murder, then there's no need. But in this case, a woman showed up with a bullet in her head, so could be a suicide, and But it's up to the coroner's jury to determine that, right? This is actually how law still works in a lot of places in the U.S. And a lot of places in the world. Actually, this is a fairly old standard. You know what, Punk? That's probably right. he he wants to play, I think. He's running around and being silly. But the 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 coroner's jury is assembled by just random citizens, right? It's a jury. So they have to which also means that the perpetrator might be among the jury, getting to determine who that they themselves were not murderers, right? So there's an inherent flaw in the system. But the general idea is that you assemble a jury of the possible murder victims' peers in order to make the determination on whether or not it's murder, and then they will either refer it to a detective agency or a local law. In this case, they determined it was a murder. Pretty obvious. And I should switch back to this. They determined it was a murder and pretty obvious, ends up with a bullet in her head. But a lot of really dumb things from the jurors who, like, for instance, one kept digging around in her head to try to find the bullet, like with his bare fingers at the murder scene. And mind you, this is 1921. Like, people are aware that there's, better ways of doing an autopsy in that. And the author later on kind of theorizes that that the dude who was digging around in her head was actually trying to fish out the bullet so that he wouldn't that they couldn't match it to his gun. King is now clawing at a box. He's right there. You can see him. King, what are you doing? What are you doing? Come here. Come here. Hey. Oh, nope. He turned away. So the looking for his crown. And I think he's always looking for his crown. He's just being wild because I'm not paying attention to him. Anyways, the after a number of other murders, most spectacularly a bombing, which took out I'm forgetting the name of the victim. What is her name? Hold on. Anna Brown, that's her name. And the there's this nice little graphic on Wikipedia that is actually from the FBI investigation, kind of showing all the links to the various murders. William K. Hale, the kind of like person who's orchestrating all this, had like a life insurance policy on the person who got no, it was this one, I think. No, John Ramsey. Yeah, I think John Ramsey was the one who had his homestead blown up, literally dynamited, and while he was having dinner, basically to get the life insurance. So a lot of really nasty stuff. Oh, Asa Kirby, that's the name. So you could see it. There's kind of like a really tangled up conspiracy here. Hold on a second, guys. My cat's being annoying. King. Stop that. Cats. So he and so Chicago, did they have you're talking about like the modern bullet matching where you literally do I have any bullets around here? I think I do. Hold on a second. Yay, I have some rounds right here. Hold on a second. You have where you have two bullets, and once fired from the same once the projectile is fired from the same pistol, that you can actually match up the markings that happen along right here on the bullet, and all you need to make those kinds of matches is a magnifying glass. Like, it's not really that complicated of a technology, but it wasn't really about like matching the barrel markings to the bullets. It was more about finding out what the caliber was, because you'd have a multitude of different calibers, like these are 9mm, for instance, and that matches a particular gun. Now there might be a lot of people with it's like if it was like 30 ACP, which one of the murders was definitely committed by 30 ACP. There'd be a lot of people with those guns, right? There'd be a lot of people with those pistols, but you can at least say, look, this person owns a gun that could have been the one that did the deed, right? That's all that they're really talking about when it's like trying to fish out the bullet from Anna's skull. But once there was a sufficient amount of murders, like such as the dynamiting of a person for their life insurance money, it became a concern for the federal government. So the odd thing about how detective work was done at this point in time is that you could either hire private detectives or get the Bureau of Investigation, that was basically trying to be a federal detective agency. King. Jesus, cat. But that but they actually Osage actually did both. They hired some detectives and they also called on the federal government to come in. Um, the original At the beginning of these investigations, the Bureau of Investigation was ran by um, I'm forgetting the name of the guy. Something Burns. Um, for, it's like Berns. Burns Detective BOI. That should come up. William J. Burns. Yeah. So the the FBI was, the BOI was being run by this guy, a part of what some people like to call the Ohio Gang. Um, he was appointed to the BOI by um, President Harding, and as many of you would know, the Harding administration was incredibly corrupt, just ridiculously corrupt. And there was a whole group of individuals who were basically using that corruption to benefit themselves. Burns was one of them. That group is called the Ohio Gang, even though many of them weren't from Ohio. But Ohio's got to be known for something, right? Oops. But Burns was quite corrupt and kind of ran it like he had run his detective agency. Burns had his own detective agency before being brought into the federal detective agency. And um, that meant that a lot of these people were really just um, in it to say that they solved something, even though they weren't actually solving it. Rather famously, yeah, it talks about the LA bombing. But does it talk about the because it's not the LA bombing, that's 1910, it's the preparedness bombing. Um ah, okay, it doesn't have the thing about the preparedness day bombing. So in 1916 there was a bombing in San Francisco um that uh killed a bunch of people, and Burns was tasked with that and really botched the job. Just really botched it. Basically, just went after some anarchists and you know got to say, "Yay, I solved another one," even though he didn't. Um, the So you could see under Burns's control, any detectives coming from the BOI are going to be necessarily unable to do their jobs correctly. Um, so, for instance, at one point, the detectives that he sent to Osage released a known criminal, thinking he would lead them to like who to like see what um the whole conspiracy was of this all these murders, and then the guy just went and committed another murder. So terrible detective work. He had to go, and luckily he did. The problem was uh he was replaced by his deputy, um J. Edgar Hoover. So J. Edgar Hoover became head of the BOI in 1924. Yeah, 1924. Um, and he basically tried to professionalize everything, he brought in a lot of educated detectives. That there was now suddenly, like, instead of just detectives being a guy that an agency hired because he just happened to like to look into things, um there were now forensics and um forensic record keeping, something that J. Edgar Hoover himself had pioneered while he was working at the Library of Congress. Um, you know, J. Edgar Hoover by profession was a librarian. If you didn't know that, if you have a problem with the FBI, blame librarians. I'm joking, of course, but um, the point is, in the midst of Hoover trying to professionalize the FBI, is when he sends in a detective um, for the Osage murders. And the Osage murders, um, let's see here. Let me see if we can find the name of. I'm forgetting the name of the head investigator. Um, do do do. Dang it. I'm forgetting the name of the guy, so hold on, let's try to find it real quick. Um Tom White. There we go. First sentence in the investigation one. So Tom White was an old Texas Ranger, and like he was actually like a frontier lawman. Wonder if we can find a picture of him. And I guess he became a warden later on in life. Oh, hey, there you go. Super easy to find him. So, this man became the lead investigator, even though he wasn't like a professional like Hoover wanted. He was he was able to be a good investigator. Um, so they went in undercover into Osage Nation and started trying to pull at the tendrils for unraveling this conspiracy, which eventually they did. Um, they managed to find that, like, for instance, um, William Burkhart, who is or not Ernest Burkhart. Um, Ernest Burkhart is being played by what is it? Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Yeah, it's Leonardo DiCaprio who's playing him. Um, so um, so Ernest Burkhart was married to Molly Sue Brown. Um, Molly Sue Brown Burkhart, or no, I'm forgetting the name of the actual family, but they took on their husbands' names. But he actually attempted to murder his wife in order to benefit his uncle, William K. Hale. Um, and I think we can find, you know, William K. Hale. I think we can find a picture of him pretty easily. Yep, there it is. Um, this is him right here. The kind of arch conspirator of this. This is him, like, amongst a bunch of people right there. You can see um a bunch of Osage, um several of whom would end up mysteriously disappearing from the so as they started picking at the seams of this conspiracy, they started getting like contradictions from previous investigations. Remember, the Osage Nation had hired some detectives as well, and theoretically, some of these detectives had gotten bribed by Hale to basically not find anything. Um, you're talking about Tom White here. This is one of the most Texan-looking people I've ever seen. Yeah, that's true. um, the uh, White here did manage to find a lot of evidence about Anna's murder, um, Anna Brown's murder. So to see, let's try to find Anna Brown Osage. Yeah, here's her with her sisters. Um, that's Anna right there. Um, and I believe she would get murdered as well. Believe she is Minnie. So, or Rita. It's hard to keep track of all the names, but she's kind of the one who starts the whole book off by getting murdered, and then it's the investigation kind of proves that all the previous statements about about that night, because she was quite the drunkard, and would go out partying and all that kind of stuff, and then you know that means that a lot of people would see her, right? Well, a lot of statements started showing up that contradicted the coroner's report, and um, the uh, the FBI, or the BOI, I should say, um, was able to piece a lot of this together by using not just uh, using all of these statements, but also kind of piecing together how a bunch of other murders were associated with this, kind of drawing together this specific conspiracy map. You know, those lines could very much just be red yarn on a board. Um, but they were able to piece it together. A lot of hijinks ensue. Remember, this is a highly volatile area because it's a mining boom. It's the oil boom is a mining boom, so it's very, very chaotic, and the investigation itself ended up having a lot of threats throughout that time. Um, so, but they were able to solve this particular one. But as we saw, that we'll get to later, about there's actually a lot more murders than just this particular conspiracy, but it's the one that everybody thinks of, and that's probably all the movie will be about. Um, but yeah, you can see there's actually a lot of murders. There's also like there's a lot of outlaws in the area, so there's that going on at the same time. But with that, they did manage to arrest Hale. We'll go back to Hale. So this is a picture of him. Really, that's the best picture we can get of him. This is him getting taken to jail. Wow, I don't have really good pictures of it. Um, But um, the concerns over um, the murders basically ceased with his arrest, right? Um, Once he was taken in, and he tried to say that he didn't know of the murders and pled not guilty, but he was found guilty and all that kind of stuff. What is this? Most evil man in modern history. Really? Really? What a stupid freaking YouTube headline. Who is this? Hold on a second. Play it. Cineranter. That's such a stupid title. Good lord. Anyways, he would spend a great deal of time in prison, and interestingly enough, he went to Leavenworth, and he at Leavenworth, a new warden was brought in, specifically Thomas Bruce. I should probably change the ticker to talking about, now we're talking about the FBI and all that happened afterward with the FBI. So Tom White, ended up you can see it, became warden of Leavenworth. So he actually had a fairly cordial relationship with William Hale. Will Hale ended up being kind of a model prisoner and everything. And White, while he was warden of Leavenworth, ended up being taken hostage during a prison escape and being shot basically point blank with a shotgun, and taking some serious damage. I wonder if there's like a thing on that here. Seriously injured after being held hostage and armed prisoners. Yeah, but that doesn't really explain it well enough. He ended up with like permanent damage. And so he ended up going to first to New Mexico, and then eventually back to Texas, basically being being a warden for the rest of his life, a prison warden. But he had to help solve kind of one of the formative cases for the creation of the FBI. So the FBI wasn't officially formed until like 1928. Oh, 1935. Wow, that's pretty late. But these cases, specifically this case, was kind of the example case of using forensic investigation. Not just interviewing people willy-nilly, but like using their testimony to kind of piece together a larger picture, and using a lot of note-taking, essentially, and cataloging. Kind of the key thing of professional investigation nowadays is cataloging. It's we think of like these CSI shows and all that kind of stuff, but in reality, it's like doing a bunch of interviews and using all of that testimony and physical evidence to piece together a larger picture through cataloging. it's the librarian mode of investigation that was, kind of why J. Edgar Hoover kind of created this whole thing. Remember, he was a librarian. But and actually, good question. Smoky on the grass. um, so weird thing about the uh um the oil fields is, while yes, they still obviously have the rights to the fields, most of it is already drilled out. So while they never lost the right to their land or anything, um there's not really any money in it. So for about 40 years after the boom, Osage Nation was back to being quite poor. But they have made a significant dent in that poverty in recent years through casinos. So, there's still a lot of poverty there, and it on reservations that don't have good enough access to like a bigger population for basically uh, casinos and that. It is some of the most poverty-stricken places in the entirety of the United States, by far. Um, you know, it it is, and Osage was like that for a little while. So, good question. Um, but back on the whole thing with the FBI, how did this affect the creation of the FBI? It essentially gave them an example case to show off the you know, how to do investigation, even though it wasn't actually done by professionals. Um, it by professionally trained, I should say. Obviously, White was a professional lawman. It just wasn't professionally trained in forensic investigation. um, uh, but it became the model by which the FBI did that, which brings us to the how this became portrayed, how all these um, events came to be portrayed. Almost immediately, there were novels about all this. You know, when you have what a lot of people would call like a last frontier. You know, I I don't like that whole, the final frontier is, unless I guess if you're talking about space, space, the final frontier. But the when you're talking about the a oil boom, it's kind of in bad taste to call it the last frontier or whatever. Because that, especially when it's literally on an Indian reservation, that's bad phrasing, um, but uh, EGS, I was never a sergeant, so I don't know what you're talking about. Um, but anyways, uh, this was often kind of like an inside story within the FBI for a long time, until finally there was, and I need to pull it up. Hold on a second, because I actually have the movie here. Imagine that. Hold on. It's in data. Videos. So obviously I can't show much of this. But I actually believe it is copyright free. But what's interesting about hold on, there we go. Show me the title card. No.
Their daily chores, their lives make up.
There we go. So the FBI story, it was framed as like a story of multiple investigations that that one of them happened to be the Osage murders, but the it actually starts off with like a show me the thing. There we go. It starts off with a plane bombing where this guy killed his mother by packing a bomb in her suitcase and having it blow up midair. Is it gonna? Come on! Yeah, there we go. At the time, that was the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. But it arguably wasn't actually a terrorist attack. It was just it was framed as one, but actually trying to murder only one person by murdering a bunch. But we do get to Osage. Hold on. Yeah. So, but it only, it has this kind of this weird hokiness to it. So, like, this is how it opens on Osage Nation.
At the bottom of things, money and Indians. For years, they owned small pieces of worthless land. With a little rain and patience, a good farmer could grow mud. That's about all. But oil was discovered, and the Indians were suddenly rich. They had so much money they didn't know how to spend it. But a few salesmen showed them how.
Yeah, so it's this kind of hokey story of like, oh, look at the Indians, they suddenly got rich. Yeah, this is 1957, mind you. 1959. Sorry. And he just kind of investigates and finds it. In this movie, J. Edgar Hoover himself actually shows up. So that's kind of weird. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'm
your new director. I did not ask.
Here we are. I believe this is actually J. Edgar Hoover making a cameo in the thing.
Just don't try to make water run uphill.
Nope.
Please don't.
I'm your new director. I did not ask for the position.
There we go.
But now that I have it, I intend to give it the best I have. I took the position on one condition, that the Bureau would be free of politics and would be operated on a merit basis. This means the Bureau will operate solely on efficiency, with trained lawyers.
Okay, are we going to see his face? No, I guess not. Well, I tried. But And EGS, yes, that was Jimmy Stewart. It wasn't a voice actor or anything. It was the actor for the movie. Jimmy Stewart in the FBI story basically plays this guy who reluctantly becomes a detective in the kind of wild days of detecting. I don't know what the um the way of saying that is, but of detective work. And we kind of see him go through many actual cases, and it tells the story of these cases. It's not particularly good on this. Like, you could go and see the movie. I think it's actually free on YouTube just fine. But it's kind of all over the place, and really aggrandizing of the FBI, even though, as we saw, the BOI made some pretty key mistakes that got at least one person killed during their initial investigation under Burns. So, that's something they don't want to explain, But this is kind of the FBI story thing is kind of the way that you could kind of think of that as propaganda, because it was done in direct connection with the FBI, trying to use Hollywood as a way of like getting the message out about how the bureau functioned and was force for good and all that kind of stuff. This is this movie is kind of the thing that cemented the popular understanding of Herbert Hoover at the time. But the only weird thing is it's not exactly propaganda, because it's not it's it's the difference being that it is working with the FBI rather than for the FBI. That's a key difference. For it to be proper propaganda, it would have to have been actually the FBI funding and writing all of this, rather than just closely related. So it's not technically propaganda, but it kind of is. But I know on the internet everybody likes to label things propaganda, but like here in the real world, when I talk about actual history, you don't get just to label things propaganda willy-nilly. So no, it wasn't technically propaganda. But their coverage of the Osage murders was not good. It used, as we heard, it kind of racist, kind of self-aggrandizing of Herbert Hoover, but none of the actual people who did the investigation, all that kind of stuff. So all of this is part of the book. All of these complaints about like how the novels and all that stuff were, and the movie was, misrepresentative. And the last part of the book is about how the like how Osages feel about the Reign of Terror today. But it's also kind of the worst part of the book. So as a reminder, let me get back to the table of contents. There we go. So as a reminder, we've covered the actual crimes, then the investigation of it. These two parts are probably what the upcoming movie is going to be about. These two, they're just going to tell the story essentially of Anna. Can we get to Anna? Basically, one of all of these characters are main characters listed as primary characters for the movie. Their husband, her husband, who basically tried to kill his wife, the Burkhart guy, Ernest Burkhart. I should probably have this. Ernest Burkhart and Molly Sue Burkhart, who you can see right here. That's Anna, and I believe that one's Mary Sue. I can't remember all of their faces. Oh wait, hey. That's Molly Burkhart there, right? Okay, so yeah, Molly Burkhart is okay. So I was correct. But wait, no, that's Molly. Okay, I was getting it mixed up. So that's Anna. That okay, whatever. I can't remember all of them, but the movie will be following them and Ernest Burkhart, and probably ends with Tom White's investigation. It probably will not go any further than that. So basically, it ends right here, even though the book continues for another section. And the book has this whole section about you could kind of tell by the chapter titles: Ghostlands, A Case Not Closed, Standing in Two Worlds, The Lost Manuscript, Blood Cries Out. These all clearly indicate a trying to say this story isn't is all these media adaptations and all that kind of stuff leave a trauma that remains, that Osages still have to deal with, right? But the one of the main problems with the book kind of reveals itself in this last thing. So we see at the end here that there are some significant problems with the book. There's no statistics or analysis of these cases. There's no point where he creates a table of all the victims and says how they were murdered, by whom and why, or anything like that, or at least saying the possibilities of that. But having a list is kind of a bare minimum for having an appendix of all that. That would be required if you were going to do any kind of analysis. But he doesn't do any analysis of this. It's just storytelling, only storytelling, no analysis, which is a very journalistic thing to do, right? They refuse to dig into the larger implications and build a case. Rather, it's pure storytelling. And in this last section, I have written, it says wallowing in self-indulgence. It's kind of, he's the guy who just shows up and he's gonna tell their story, and isn't that great? And it's let Osages do their own, tell their own story, but have I been to I've never even been to Oklahoma. No. Um, I that's not my area. I live in the Southwest. I've been on many reservations, not Osage though. Also, Osage Nation is technically not a reservation. Um, just a weird oddity that that's important to point out is that, and I've been using the term reservation here too, but like technically you're not supposed to. Um, technically you're supposed to refer to it as just Indian territory, because it's it predates the reservation system, so it's granted land rather than land in reserve. So the thing about a reservation is that it is land held in reserve by the federal government for that tribe, right? As opposed to land granted to that tribe by the federal government. See the difference? The Osage Nation essentially owns the land fee simple. Same way, settlers own land. As opposed to reservations where they do not have that. So a little bit different from a reservation. And Bam Man says, in fairness to journalists who write history without analysis, when they do try historical analysis, it's usually terrible. And yeah, you're not wrong there. But like, this is the main thing that that I take issue with the book, is that it doesn't have that analysis. There's so many times in the last chapter that he talks about how this is a larger problem, and don't read this as don't read this book as if I'm talking about only one specific conspiracy. There's a bunch of conspiracies here, and like, no, you don't prove that. You didn't do the work necessary to make that claim. Your argument is flawed. Do the research necessary to make that claim. We will all benefit from that, So like, yeah, the analysis might be terrible in the end, but at least do it, That is my key issue with this book, is that it is basically just pure storytelling. That's all it is. And also I should point out that the storytelling in and of itself is pretty disjointed. So when we were looking at the hold on, let me get to the page. There we go. When we were looking at the table of contents, we first hear the story of like several different killings and like just what Osage Nation was like during the terror. And then we hear the story of the investigation. These two stories overlap significantly. And they but in order to try to not repeat himself, Gren purposely leaves stuff out. So especially during the investigation part of it, there's a bunch of other murders that we like learn about that should have been in this section, right? That we should have been told about, and they just kind of suddenly come up, and it's like, what? When did you talk about this? There was a bunch of times I'm just like using the search function to try to find when this came up, because of course I was doing a bit of grad school reading, but like, there's a bunch of points where like literally he'll bring up something that he hasn't talked about before, but he'll talk about it like he has talked about it before, which is just terrible storytelling. So, yeah, as you can tell, I didn't like the book. uh, I don't like that there's no statistics or analysis. I don't like that the end section is really self-indulgent. The I'm here to tell your story. I really dislike that whole last section. Instead of it being about like one of the people he's interviewing, like make that the central character. Instead, he's the central character, which is terrible. Then there's this whole disjointed storytelling. And the Osages themselves, um, within the story, are always acted upon, but they're never actors themselves, right? Like they're just victims, and that's it. We don't really see how, like, within even this particular conspiracy, a lot of this has to do with like women marrying men who are like actively conniving against them. Part of why Burkhart is such an important character is that he ended up breaking down and kind of tattling narking on Hale. And tattling. He tattled about his murderer uncle. It's a terrible way to phrase that. And Bam again with a really really important comment here, saying journalist history is always frustrating, even when it's done relatively well. Yeah, that's always. Like there are some there are some journalistic histories that I absolutely adore, but they are so rare. They are so rare. But this one I don't. Now, and the problem with Osages being acted upon but never actors themselves, like obviously this whole thing, these are marriages. This W. Smith guy, he gets freaking married twice. Burkhart gets married. Like a marriage is a two-way street, right? These aren't, the freaking, cavemen coming and bonking their wives on the head and carrying them back to the cave. No, like one of the problems is that Molly ends up like kind of realizing that her husband has been poisoning her, and speaking out about this, but like it's for her, like she is so broken by this betrayal, right? But he never really goes like to the author, forgetting his first name, but to the author, that relationship is essentially like it just happens. We get no telling the story of how these women came to be married to their killers, right? Like that's a fascinating story in and of itself. um Mr. J. Because I had earlier accidentally phrased it as tattling. Jesse James brought to justice after one of his gang members tattled on him. PhD. Luckily, I did withdraw the statement. But yeah, there's so much more storytelling that could be done about the women, like in this story. Like, tell their story. Like, that's what this first section is supposed to be about, but it's not about her. It's about her end, which tell her story. But that's why, and I actually put that at the end of this little section marker. I hope the movie will spark new research and basically somebody will write a new book to basically patch up all of these problems. That hopefully, I would guess that the cultural affairs officer for Osage Nation might already have that in the works. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And the inevitably with the movie, we're definitely not going to have this problem with Osages kind of being purely victims, right? Like, we're going to see their story told, because you kind of have to do that in a movie, right? You can't just kind of write them in as victims, because they have to speak, in the movie. So I hope that the movie itself will spark new interest in the topic, and will eventually lead to some better scholarship on it. So now is a good time to start taking some questions. So if you guys want to ask me any questions, be sure to type them below. For instance, we already have one right here from EGS Biographies. So asking, will I be doing a review of the movie? And most definitely, yeah, this is kind of my topic. Like, American violence is my topic. Like, I wrote my dissertation on American violence in the Southwest during the frontier period. Like, that's what I have a PhD in. So, like, while this isn't my region or my time frame, it's almost my time frame. My time frame ends in 1919. This story starts in 1921, so it's only 2 years apart. And while Oklahoma is not the Southwest, they like to call themselves the Southwest. They are not, but the Oklahoma is Southwest adjacent, right? Yeah, so and I don't need to have my headphones on anymore. So it'll be interesting to see what this movie does, whether it sparks new stuff, new scholarship, and clearly I've already done enough reading in order to do an actual review of the movie, right? So it'll be interesting. One of the things that I was heavily interested in about this book, because this book has actually been sitting for a while just waiting for me to read it. Like, it was one of those ones of like, I'll get to that eventually, because it was like, oh, this is kind of my topic. I need to learn about it. So like even before the movie was announced or anything, it's been sitting on my shelf for a while, digital shelf for a while. Um, I've been planning on reading it because it's so close to my topic. Um, and I hope that with this movie coming out, that there'll be more, because I wasn't checking a bunch of his sources. I did check some of his sources. There's like, but there were FBI files that, in case you don't know, the FBI has a website that you can literally just go and find all the files for this on their website, digitized, all ready to go. You don't have to leave your frickin', wherever you're sitting. You could just do it at home. And so it's super useful to be able to do that. I actually use the FBI files in my dissertation a few times. It's super useful. The the so there'll be hopefully people who go further into depth than I did trying to read through this book, because I was just reading through it, right? I wasn't trying to pick at every little thread, right? So I hope somebody will eventually do that, because this is a fascinating topic, and especially in the early 20s, there's just so many things, so many outlier violent events that we have. Well, one of them did recently get a filmic depiction with Watchmen when they depicted the Tulsa riot, and that one, like most people didn't know about it until Watchmen depicted it. So I'm hoping that the same thing will happen here with the Osage murders. That a lot of people will be were unaware of it, and now this will be bringing a lot of um, scrutiny and attention to it, both from scholarship and the public. A lot of movies do that quite well. A lot of movies don't. I always hear the argument that movies are that it's no matter how bad the movie is, it's always a net good to have people, made aware of these things. And it's like, how many times have you heard of people who really like the movie, so they want to find out more about it, and then as soon as they find out that the movie has nothing to do with like the actual story, they now suddenly they're like, history is boring. Um, it's one of those things where if the movie does a bad job, it can easily do exactly the opposite of gaining attention. So I will definitely want to review the movie and like give it a fair shake with that in mind, right? So hopefully that answers your question well enough. I think I kind of went on a little bit of a ramble, but that hopefully explains. Yes, I will be reviewing it, and I actually have a deeper reason for reviewing it. But of course, I have to get the the Blu-ray when it comes out. So the next question comes from Bam Man. What are some of the historical works by journalists that I love? Good question. Let's see here. That's a really difficult question because my bookcase is in my bedroom. So yeah, and by the way, every time you see me in front of my bookcases, that's just my bedroom. So that's over there, and I can't see it from here. And unfortunately, I can't just like pick up my computer and take y'all with me. So if I could look at my bookcase, I would show you it. But you know what I can do? I will show you my Google Play library. So hold on a second. So let's see here. What's a good one that I've read recently? Well, this isn't exactly. Oh wait, no, that's not it. Where is it? It's not the Rise and Fall of the Caucasian Race. It's like the Myth of Race or something like that. Oh, I think I have that as a PDF. Hold on. Oh, K is notes from Myth America. No. Oh, here it is. Yep, I have it as a PDF. Let me download that real quick. Hold on. So this book was super useful. It's written by a scientist, so I don't know if that can really be called a journalist, right? But it's a scientist who does a lot of journalism, so maybe. I did really like this book. It was super useful for an episode that I'm writing, that I already written and edited. If you want to see the episode is about how race is a social construct, and it's about like how that is. This book was super useful for that. And if you actually want to see that on Patreon, there is a preview up if you want to go and see the preview. I'm going to be making a lot of changes from the rough draft, but you can go see the rough draft right now. Let's see here. What else? Oh yeah. Not Sandy Hook, but what was it called? It's kind of the David Cullen wrote two books. Here's his Parkland one. Wrote two books about mass shootings. This one, he wrote kind of like the definitive book on Columbine. And he wrote a book about like the aftermath of Parkland, specifically, the anti-gun movement that came in its wake, driven by Parkland students who were there. Um, the David Cullen is a journalist, and this is really great work. Really great work. This Parkland book is more journalistic, but the Columbine one is a great work of history. There's a book I'm reading right now. Let's see here. Hold on, let me pull it up. Make sure that this thing is fully synced. Good. Here we are. So the book is called The Sniper in the Tower. And I'm only on page 36, but let me put a bookmark in. No, I need a bookmark. What? How do I add a bookmark on this interface? Ah! It's not letting me add a bookmark. Whatever. Okay. Point is, it's called The Sniper in the Tower. It's about the Whitman mass shooting from the Texas Tower. There's another one that's about. There's a lot of really good stuff about mass shootings that like historians have just kind of avoided talking about it. There's another one called From a Taller Tower that's supposed to be like a sequel to this book. That's about the Las Vegas shooting. Definitely the best work on the topic, period. All of those are journalists. So those are really good work. And many of them are quite historical. So yeah, there's plenty of great writing from journalists who are historians now, like journalist historians. They may not be professionals, but there is good work. So let me go back to that. Let's see here. What other questions? I don't know who Giles Milton is, Erjo, or however you say that. None of these look like books I would have read, no. A lot of World War II stuff. I just don't really care about World War II. It's an overdone topic. Yeah. So, are there any further questions? Especially about this book? Yeah. Can I answer anything else? Maybe something you would like to know about before the movie comes? Not seeing any further questions. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, oh wait, all right. What's the movie's budget? I can look it up. It's very easy to look this stuff up. It's $200 million. So basically Osage was kind of the only one that got all the early 20th century petrodollars. There was some Cheyenne some stuff on the Cheyenne reservation that was petrodollars. But you'd be surprised how often tribes have something along those lines. So like here in the Southwest, Navajo Nation ended up getting a lot of money during the uranium booms of the 1940s through 70s. There's still significant uranium deposits in Navajo Nation, and they definitely try to use it. It's also led to a lot of really irradiated places. Like there's a lake on Navajo Nation that's like a mine tailing that kind of breached a barrier and then irradiated a lake. So there's problems that come along with this. Mining always does. There's there's no clean way to mine something. Um, but yeah, as far as I know, the only ones who really made it rich off of the petrodollars, petrodollar is actually referring to a different to like a economic concept, but from an oil boom was basically only Osage Nation. Um, the and EGS, no, I've never gotten free tickets to a movie. um, oh, I missed this question. Yes, it's as um this is very much linked to Hoover. I encourage you, if you have time once this stream is over, to go and rewatch some of it. We actually talked quite a bit about Hoover in this stream. Um, so next question from Smokey on the Grass. I don't know why I like that username. It's just a good name. So what was De Niro's character trying to do? De Niro, I believe, is playing William K. Hale, right? Let's see here. Characters. Robert De Niro is playing William King Hale, yeah. And Hale was kind of the, if you remember going back to this, Hale is kind of the one at the center of all this. He's the one, he's kind of like the arch conspirator. So, yeah, he's also just kind of a sleazebag. Like, this guy was like one of the richest men in Osage, and you know, very much was just a leech. And what do you mean trying to do with the murders? He was trying to get their head rights by, having these marriages and everything. He was married to Roy Bunch was married to wait, no, it's hard to keep track of all the different names because it's a very complex conspiracy. Full of a lot of different murders and everything, but the main thing is he was either getting life insurance policies or gaining access to their head rights, either through marriage or through through uh, 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 conservatorships. There we go. Through conservatorships. You know, actually, I think they called it protectorships. Conservatorship is more of a legal concept than a centuries old thing. They're technically different things. Main thing is he was gaining access to their head rights. That's the whole thing. By killing certain members then that of the tribe, that then their head right reverts to somebody else, and so on and so forth. It's really complex, but the main thing is gaining access to their head rights. USS Chicago asks asks did this event get turned into dime novels? By this time, dime novels are no longer a single dime, but yeah, it was turned into Pulp Fiction. We talked a little bit about that during the stream. Is that that the there was a lot of fictionalization of this, and yeah, Pulp Fiction had an absolute ball telling this story. So I don't really know what that's supposed to mean. That's not really how tribes work. So I don't know what you're asking there, DM. Um, and AGS, there's a million different books I could name that would make for good movies. You know, that like there's just there's literally a million I could name. That's too broad. So I think that's all the questions, right? Okay, so I think we've covered the book pretty well. Why I didn't like it, it's not that I disliked it. It's not that I despise it or anything. It's that I didn't like it. Not liking and disliking are two different things. The we talked about the way what the atmosphere in terms of the historiography, journalistic kind of disposition of the author, and um, lack of historical work on the topic. This book was written in. Then we talked about like what the Reign of Terror was, what murders count as part of it, and all that, and kind of some of the story of those murders, and how that conspiracy was investigated and prosecuted by the Bureau of Investigation, and how that became kind of like the founding story of a lot of forensic investigation. We talked about the problems I have with the book, where it lacks statistics and analysis. The last section is wallowing in a bit of self-indulgence. The storytelling is kind of disjointed, and the Osage the Osage victims are purely victims. You know, they really don't enter the story in any other way. Honestly, that's something that like you kind of can't help that last part, but it's worth noting. Tell their stories when you can. And I hope that since we will have another round of popular interest in the topic, much like back in 1959 with the FBI story, that we will see a renewed batch of interest in this topic. I hope you guys found this useful, and if you would like to read the book, it is linked in the description. And for a final time, I will put the book's details right there in the comments. If you would like to go and pick up the book, it is the Amazon affiliate link is right there. Go check it out. I'm sure the movie will make some significant departures from it, so it's worth seeing. It's worth reading. It not exactly my cup of tea, but and EGS, yes, there is an audio book version. But be sure to go and pick it up. The if there are any further questions, you can put them in the comments below. But I think it's time to call it a night. So, even though it is still very much daytime outside, but please feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below. I will see you all in the next one.